Shirk or sharaka is to assign partners or people who share in a thing. Specifically, when we're talking about it in a religious context, in the Islamic context, when we say shirk, shirk with a big S, if you will, then this is assigning partners or things or entities that share in what is due only to Allah. And this, as we know, is considered an unforgivable sin. This is one of the greatest sins you could possibly commit, to associate others with Allah. And so it is extremely serious. But, as we'll see, it's also extremely difficult to protect ourselves from. Because, as with most things, there are levels, there are grades, there's a spectrum, if you will. So, one of the things I wanted to share, and actually before I do that, I wanted to highlight where this comes in so important, how central this concept is. I mean, we know it, but just as a reminder. The statement we make repeatedly throughout the day, the statement we made either when we decided to become Muslim or when we reaffirm our Islam daily, inshallah, La ilaha illallah. There is nothing that deserves to be worshipped except for Allah. That first part is talking about shirk. La ilaha. There is no object of worship. There's nothing that deserves our adoration and our devotion and our obedience. Nothing. If you stop there, it is a complete sentence. La ilaha. There is no object of worship. If you were to picture a chessboard and the pieces represent objects of worship and you say La ilaha, it is as if you have wiped the board clean. Nothing remains on the board. Nothing at all. But then you continue and you say what? Illallah. Except for Allah. So you wipe the board clean, then you put one piece back on the board. There's no question what remains on the board at this point. There's nothing on the board except for this one thing. That is the definition of our faith. But it starts with nafi, negation. La ilaha. Yeah? La haqqun ma'bud illallah. Nothing has a right, deserves to be worshipped, deserves to be adored except for Allah. This is so important. But as we said, there's subtleties, there's grades, there's a spectrum. So what do I mean by that? Listen to the meaning of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him. In one example, he is speaking and he says that the thing I fear most for you is ash-shirk al-asghar. So we're talking shirk here. But he's being very specific. He said, is ash-shirk al-asghar. That's saying, as many of you know, this is the lesser shirk or the minor shirk, or as it's defined by others sometimes as shirk al-khafi, the hidden shirk. The hidden association or making partners with Allah. And he said that, he defined it even further. He said, what is this? And he said, ar-riya. Ar-riya, yani meaning that we're doing things to be seen by others. When we know someone is watching, we up our game. Whether we speak a different way, we behave a different way, or yani, and this is the subtlety of it. This is well beyond what's on the page here. We even feel a different way. Yani, if you feel a change in your heart, when you see other people looking at you, you find yourself feeling compelled to be more cautious. This is a subtle form of associating them with Allah. Their opinion, their estimation, their value of what you're doing, You're associating that, and you're changing it because of them. When the true believer should not concern himself with that, but only with how it weighs in the scales of Allah. So riyah is very dangerous. But it's even more dangerous. Listen to another statement from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, where he talks again. And I said, we're just scratching the surface today. He's speaking now to Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. His most excellent companion, and the one who led the ummah, led the nation after his death. He said, polytheism, shirk, enters your people more quietly, more secretly than the movement of ants. Than the movement of ants. I want you to think for a second as you're walking in your neighborhood or even around your house. We know what this area is like, especially in the summers. Do you notice or do you even think about the little things that are crawling on the ground? Do you give them even a second thought? He's saying here that a shirk enters amongst your people like the movement of ants. And he's so imperceptible, so difficult to notice. And so Abu Bakr asks, is there a kind of polytheism? Is there a kind of shirk? Association besides associating anything with Allah. Meaning in worship. He's talking here about the big shirk, the one that takes you out of the fold of Islam completely, when you worship other than Allah, explicitly. Is there something other than this? And the Prophet said, by him who has my life in his power, in his hands, a shirk is more concealed than the movement of ants. Shall I not teach you something by which if you say it, it will eliminate the minor or major shirk? And he said, yes. And then he gave a dua here, and we're just going to narrate the meaning right now, where he told him to say, O Allah, I seek refuge in you, lest I associate anything with you, make shirk with you, of anything while I know it. I do it knowingly. And I seek your forgiveness for what I do not know. And this is an important principle as well, just as a side point. This idea that those things we do knowingly are the things that we should be most fearful of. When we know right from wrong, and we still do what we know to be wrong, there is no question of our guilt. There is no question of our worthiness for being punished. If we are not punished, it is because of the mercy of the one who had the right to punish us. And in the case of Allah, he has the absolute right and the absolute ability and the intimate knowledge of what we know and do not know. So we're seeking refuge from his wrath in his mercy. And we seek his forgiveness for those things we do not know, which he's already offered, in fact. That when we do something genuinely because we do not know, then we are forgiven for it. Inshallah, in the second half, I want to bring home the reason why I picked this particular topic. And I'll explain my reason for it at that time as well, inshallah. Idu ila Allah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya wa mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabauhum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Now, I don't think it's lost on any of us what day today is. Most of us that are here in part because we're actually off work, or we're out of school, or somehow or another our calendars have been cleared. As a general rule, I try not to fall into the trap of talking about the holidays on the holidays, because it feeds into the problem of elevating the importance, highlighting the issue, rather than teaching ourselves and our families and our community to make little of it and to not let it be so significant in our thoughts and in our minds. So I had no intention on doing anything related to the time of year initially, but then something popped in my head. Most of us, we know, as we're walking around in the grocery stores, in the malls, and places like that, at this time of year, one of the things that you can't escape is the music being pumped in over the speakers continually. And for someone like myself, who was a non-Muslim, who was a practicing Christian for many years before I became Muslim, and grew up with the traditions that surround this time of year, many of those things are deeply ingrained and embedded inside of me, even still. Even though it's been nearly 30 years since I observed this day, those things are still deeply ingrained and embedded in me. So I can't help but find myself humming along or remembering the tunes, remembering the lyrics, songs I haven't sung in decades, but I still remember them. In one of these instances, I was walking through one of the stores or somewhere like that, and the music was pumping through the speakers as usual. And sure enough, it struck upon something that I had very intimate familiarity with, and I started humming along. But then I began to think about what it was saying. Now, many of us, we know that there's always the perennial argument about whether or not the holidays are something that we should avoid, that we should not celebrate, and the argument about whether it's a religious holiday or it's not a religious holiday, and all of these things, they come up. Even around Christmas, even though to many it would seem pretty obvious that it's a religious holiday. But some would make the argument, they say, well, it's all very commercialized now. The religious aspect is really not the focus anymore. This is what you'll hear some people say. And in fairness, there's not an absence of truth to what they're saying. But in that vein, because I hope for all of us it's not lost on us that the explicitly religious aspects of Christmas are directly opposed to what we believe as Muslims. Because the Christian belief about Jesus is that he is a sharik. He is a partner. He is one who shares in the dominion that we believe belongs solely to Allah and Allah alone. That everything other than Allah is a creation of Allah and subject to His dominion, His control, His judgment. That includes the prophets and messengers. No matter how great, no matter how miraculous their birth may have been, they are all still creations of Allah. And as Jesus even attested to that he should be referred to as Abdullah, the slave servant of Allah, of God. So leaving that part aside, that should be obvious, inshallah. That should not be something that we need to have a conversation about. But the commercial aspect, which is what some will point to. I want you to think for a moment about the image of Santa. And no, I don't mean look at me and see what people see when they look at me. But think about the image of Santa and the stories around Santa. Some of you may not know many of the stories around Santa. But there's many songs that are sung about Santa around this time. One of them that is well known, and inevitably you've heard playing over the speakers, is called Santa Claus is Coming to Town. You've heard this. It was very popular. The name may not mean anything to you, but Bing Crosby had a huge hit with it. Granted, it was about 70 years ago, a little over 70 years ago, but still, it was a big song. It's still sung by many people. But I want you to pay attention to some of the lyrics in this song. You may have never noticed it. You may have never even given it much thought or even listened very closely. But listen to the lyrics in this song that is sung over and over again at this time. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. Now, at first, it might not strike you, but let's go back over it. He sees you when you're sleeping. What does the name of Allah, Al-Basir, mean? The all-seeing. He knows when you're awake. What do the names of Allah, Al-Alim and Al-Khabir, mean? The one of full knowledge, the one who's well informed. He knows if you've been bad or good. Again, Al-Alim. So be good for goodness sake. Be good, why? Because according to this song, because Santa Claus sees you. Santa Claus hears you. So because Santa hears you, be good. But if you were to tell some of those same people you should be good because God knows, they would call you extreme, a fundamentalist. But yet, by their own words, let's call a spade, as they say. They worship Santa. I know that sounds like a far stretch, but this is what they teach their kids. And as some of you have been watching the news, see, they are so insistent upon maintaining the fantasy of Santa that even the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news will give predictions or Santa sightings, and they'll encourage this fantasy even till today. It is so deeply embedded into the society, and they don't even question what it is that they're saying or what they're teaching their kids. Why would they care about God if God is so distant and so remote and has no seemingly impact on their lives? But Santa, Santa's coming to town, and Santa's bringing gifts. He's going to get me my new bike. He's going to get me that new gaming console. And parents will continue to try and maintain the lie even after they know their kids know better. They will continue to perpetrate the lie and teach them these sorts of clear and utter association of others with God. He sees you when you're sleeping. Now, if we made that a human being and we said he sees you when you're sleeping, what would we think? Pedophile, predator, somebody call the cops. He knows when you're awake. Again, pedophile, predator, call the cops. He knows as you've been bad or good. Stalker alert. So be good for goodness sake. This is what is so rampant in these times. These are the dangers. Again, the whole religious aspect we shouldn't even have to talk about. But this is the commercial aspect we're talking about. This is what's circulating in the air more than all of the others. You don't hear a lot of the Christian stuff, but you hear this. I guarantee most of you have heard this song at least once in the last week. If you were at any grocery store, any shopping of any kind, this probably was on the speaker somewhere. You might not have noticed it, but it was there. What is the message? This is association with Allah. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. So whether we want to take issue with the religious aspect of the holiday, the society itself promotes this sort of association. اللهم أقسم لنا من خشيتك ما يعلو بيننا وبين معاصيك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تحول به علينا مصيبة الدنيا ومتئنا بأسمائنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من عادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا تسلط علينا من لا يرحمنا. O Allah, apportion for us fear of you that shall come between us and disobedience of you, and of obedience to you which shall cause us to obtain your paradise, and of certainty which shall make the afflictions of the world easy for us, and enjoyment of our hearing, seeing, and strength as long as you keep us alive, and make it the inheritor, yani lasting until we reach death from us. Let our vengeance be upon those who have wronged us, and aid us against those who show enmity towards us. And don't make our affliction our religion, and don't make this world our greatest concern, nor the limit of our knowledge, and don't give power over us to those who will not have mercy on us. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي وللمؤمنين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقيم الصلاة.